So verses 8 through 13 in the book of Daniel. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. The commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has allotted your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces look gaunt in comparison to the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please put your servants to the test for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined in your presence, and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Okay. So in verse 8, Daniel says he's made up his mind, I am not going to defile myself.
Yeah.
Right? So what does that mean? The king's food really probably isn't kosher.
Yeah.
Right. Also, when you think about who Daniel is and where he came from, there's a lot of allusion here that Daniel could have been of a priestly order.
Yeah.
Right. And there were ceremonial things that he was supposed to take into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he can't do the kosher food. Some of the stuff he could eat, but it was probably offered to idols first. So he can't do that.
Yeah.
And then there's also this thing that if he goes along with it, he's aligning himself with the king of Babylon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And this just shows you early on how different Daniel was than everybody else, how set apart he was, and just how strong his faith was, and where he came from, where his faith came from.
Yeah.
I mean, and we see this 7 or 8 times in this book.
Absolutely. Now, something that's interesting here is, Daniel can't really control the change of his name, right? They change his name.
Yeah.
But even though he has a new name, he knows who he is. Right. And he cannot control the re-education that he has to go through, but it doesn't really matter because he already knows what the truth is.
Yeah.
Right. And something he could do, though, is he could refuse to eat, and he could request something different. And this is his way of refusing to assimilate and to serve somebody other than his God.
I do think we should know, we talk, it talks about young men. They don't get into exactly how young, but I mean, they're believed, and I read that, I mean, they could be as young as like 13, 14 at this time, right? It's possibly.
Anywhere from like 13 to 18.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not talking about young 20-year-old men. Like, they're talking about what we consider teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Possibly.
So what does Daniel do is he doesn't ask them like, hey, can you bring us meat that hasn't been offered to idols? He doesn't ask them to change the way they prepare or anything. He just says, bring us this other stuff instead. And it's basically a vegetarian diet.
Yeah.
Something interesting about that too, though, is that the word vegetable there can also mean grains.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So that could include grains and breads and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think this is also really, really interesting is he seeks permission, right?
Yeah.
He could have. He makes a request. He could have gone on hunger strike.
Yeah.
But instead, he appeals to them and says, "Look, will you give me permission to do this?" Mm-hmm. And they want to, he's been given favor. They want to do it for him, but they're scared, right?
Yeah.
The commander's like, "Well, I do it, but like I'm going to lose my head if I do."
Well,
it.
yeah, because they're worried that if all these other, we'll call them soldiers or whatever you want to call them, they're drinking wine and eating meat and all of this stuff, they're going to be muscular and all that stuff. And they're talking about this different of a diet. They're worried that they're going to look different. And I mean, even now, you can know, like, that person is probably a vegetarian. I mean, and again, that's not, I don't think that in a negative way, but you could usually, sometimes you could tell, like,
some physical differences.
or you could tell if that person is not a vegetarian.
Right.
Maybe that's the thing.
But if somebody serving in the king's court looks gaunt or looks sickly or doesn't look like he's well fed,
It makes the king look bad.
Absolutely, right? On a number of different levels, right?
Yeah.
So what does he do? Daniel proposes a test and he gives them 10 days, and he agrees to abide by whatever is judged thereafter, right? So he's like, you can do, you deal with us according to what you see. Ultimately saying, kind of giving him permission. Like, it doesn't really say this implicitly here, but like, there's only two ways that can go. If he comes back and he's like, I don't like what I see, Daniel and his buddies either have to accept the diet or die.
Yeah.
It's one of the two, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's
Well, yeah, and he knows what following God means. Like I mean, it goes back to when you think about Abraham and Isaac. You're like, what? God calls Abraham to kill his own son, the one that he gave to him, but Abraham knew that God commanded him to do this, and so God's going to make it work. However, he doesn't know, but God's going to make it work. And Daniel, at the same time, he knew, like, God has told me not to eat this.
right.
He'll make it work. Whether I have to die because of it, okay. Or if it works and I can continue to live, God will make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So if we continue this story, we get to 14 through 17, and this is what happens. So he listened to them in this matter and put them to the test for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. And as for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence and every kind of literature and expertise. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. All right, so what we see here is that Daniel's intent here, it pays off. His test pays off.
His faith is paid off, yeah.
Yeah. So the 4 guys look good. They look better than the other people who are eating all the other junk. And so the overseer agrees to continue to allow it. He continues to give them the diet that they have asked for. Now, these 4 then grow in knowledge and intellect, gaining expertise. But what's really interesting here in verse 17 is it doesn't credit the Babylonians and King Nebuchadnezzar for giving them that intellect.
Yeah.
God gives them their knowledge and intelligence.
Right.
Right. Wisdom comes from God alone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Daniel credits God for gifting them with knowledge, intelligence, discernment, and giving them expertise in literature.
Right.
And then additionally, Daniel comes to understand all kinds of visions and dreams. And that's going to be really important through this book.
For sure, yeah.